Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. When people hear the name Johnny Appleseed, they often picture a cheerful, barefoot man wandering across the American frontier, tossing apple seeds wherever he went and creating orchards as a gift for future generations. It's a heartwarming story, one that has taken on the feel of a folk legend. But how much of it actually reflects the real life of John Chapman, the man behind the myth? The truth is both more fascinating and more complex than the simple tales often told. Johnny Appleseed wasn't just planting trees randomly for the sake of kindness. He was a shrewd businessman, a deeply religious man, and a true frontiersman. His story is one that blends history, myth, and American ideals of exploration and entrepreneurship. Over the next few minutes, we'll peel back the layers of legend to uncover the real John Chapman, separating fact from fiction, and explore why his legacy still matters today. This journey into the truth behind Johnny Appleseed will show how storytelling can transform a historical figure into a national symbol, and why understanding the reality makes his achievements even more impressive. In order to understand Johnny Appleseed's world, we have to imagine life in America during the late 1700s and early 1800s, a time when the country was still young and the frontier was pushing steadily westward. Settlers were moving into new territories in places like Ohio, Indiana, and Pennsylvania, carving homes out of the wilderness. Survival was tough, and families depended heavily on the land for everything they needed. In this rough, unpredictable environment, apples weren't just a pleasant fruit to snack on, they were a critical part of daily life. Apples provided settlers with a reliable food source, but more importantly, they were a key ingredient for cider, which was much safer to drink than often contaminated water. Hard cider became a staple beverage, essential for hydration, nutrition, and even trade. Sweet-eating apples were relatively rare at the time. The apples grown from seed were usually too sour or bitter to enjoy raw. Instead, nearly every homestead needed apple trees primarily to produce the cider that was vital for frontier life. There was another reason apples were important: land claims. In many areas, planting a permanent crop, like an orchard, was one way settlers could legally establish ownership of land. Governments and land companies encouraged settlers to show they were serious about building permanent homes, and planting apple orchards was a powerful way to do just that. So, when John Chapman roamed the frontier planting apple nurseries, he wasn't just spreading seeds for beauty or charity. He was helping settlers anchor themselves to the land, making his work an essential part of America's westward expansion. John Chapman, the real man behind the legend of Johnny Appleseed, was born on September 26, 1774, in Leominster, Massachusetts. His early life was shaped by hardship. His mother died when he was very young, and his father, a soldier in the American Revolutionary War, was often absent. Growing up in a rough, ever-changing America, John developed a deep love for nature and a fiercely independent spirit that would define the rest of his life. Far from the carefree drifter often depicted in stories, John Chapman had a clear mission, rooted in both business and deep religious conviction. He wasn't simply tossing apple seeds at random across the countryside. Instead, he carefully established nurseries, fenced plots of young apple trees, and returned periodically to tend them. As settlers moved into new territories, Chapman would sell them saplings at a low cost, making a modest living while supporting the expansion of the American frontier. His work was methodical and entrepreneurial, not whimsical. At the very center of John Chapman's life's work was his deep and unwavering devotion to Swedenborgian Christianity, a branch of Christian theology based on the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg. Unlike many mainstream religious movements of his time, Swedenborgianism placed a unique emphasis on the spiritual interconnectedness between humanity and the natural world. It taught that all of creation, every tree, river, and living creature, was an expression of divine love and wisdom. To Chapman, planting apple trees wasn't just an agricultural or economic activity, it was a sacred act. Each seed he sowed was a living symbol of faith, a contribution to a grander divine plan where humans were seen as caretakers entrusted with the well-being of Earth itself. This profound spiritual outlook shaped every aspect of Chapman's life. His choice to wear simple homemade clothes, often depicted as threadbare or unconventional, wasn't due to poverty or eccentricity alone. It reflected a rejection of materialism and vanity, ideas Swedenborgianism warned against. By living outdoors, often sleeping under the stars rather than seeking shelter, Chapman was not merely a wandering pioneer. He was living his belief in being close to God's natural creation, maintaining a purity and simplicity that honored the sacredness of the world around him. Moreover, his gentle, generous demeanor, offering seeds freely to those in need, helping settlers establish orchards, and reportedly refusing to harm even the smallest creature, was not an affectation but a genuine expression of his religious commitment to kindness, stewardship, and universal love. For John Chapman, every interaction with nature and humanity was an opportunity to practice his faith. Through his quiet, tireless acts, he turned the vast, untamed American frontier into a place not just of survival, but of spiritual cultivation. Thus, Johnny Appleseed became more than a legend. He was a living testament to the power of living one's deepest convictions every single day. Many of the popular stories about Johnny Appleseed blur the line between truth and myth. But when we dig deeper, a more complex and fascinating portrait of John Chapman emerges. One of the most enduring images is that he wore a cooking pot on his head as a hat. While this story has captivated imaginations for generations, historical evidence suggests it's likely exaggerated. Chapman did indeed travel very lightly and valued practicality above appearance, but reports indicate he typically wore simple, often tattered clothing and a broad-brimmed hat or cap for protection from the elements. Not a pot. The idea of a pot hat probably evolved as a colorful embellishment to emphasize his rustic, almost saint-like simplicity. Another common myth is that Johnny Appleseed wandered aimlessly across the American frontier, sowing seeds wherever he pleased. In reality, Chapman was incredibly strategic. He carefully chose locations along developing settlement paths where he knew settlers would soon arrive, planted nurseries with real care, and even fenced them in to protect the young trees from animals. He would then either return later to tend the trees or leave them in the care of trusted neighbors. Far from being a drifting dreamer, he was a savvy businessman who understood both the law, planting trees was a way to lay claim to land, and the needs of pioneers who would require fruit orchards. There's also the myth that he gave away all his trees for free out of pure generosity. While Chapman was undeniably generous, offering seeds and even saplings at reduced cost to settlers in need, he largely ran his work as a business. He sold saplings for small fees, which helped fund his continual travels and the establishment of more nurseries. His generosity was real, but it coexisted with a practical understanding of trade and survival on the frontier. The popular image of Johnny Appleseed as a universally beloved and harmless folk hero is, in truth, a simplification of a far more nuanced and human reality. In the frontier society of early America, a world that valued conformity, survival skills, and traditional religious views, John Chapman stood out sharply. His kindness, humility, and the practical benefits his apple nurseries offered made him a respected figure to many settlers who relied on his trees for cider and livelihood. His generosity in offering affordable saplings and his willingness to help neighbors in need added to his reputation as a man of rare compassion. However, not everyone saw him in such a favorable light. Chapman's eccentricities, such as traveling barefoot across rough terrain, sleeping outdoors regardless of the weather, wearing ragged clothes, and fervently preaching the little-known teachings of Swedenborgian Christianity, set him apart in unsettling ways. To some, he was not a quaint wanderer, but a suspicious outsider whose unorthodox lifestyle and spiritual fervor were difficult to understand and even harder to trust. In a world where survival often depended on sticking together and adhering to shared norms, Chapman's deep individualism and mystical approach to life could make him seem alien. Despite this mixed reception, or perhaps precisely because of it, John Chapman carved out a place in American cultural memory. His refusal to conform, his dedication to living according to his beliefs, and his deep respect for nature resonated with the later American ideals of rugged individualism, pioneer, spirit, and reverence for the natural world. Over time, the rough edges of his real story were smoothed out, turning him into a legend, a symbol of generosity, simplicity, and the idea that one person, by living according to a higher purpose, could sow seeds not just across the land, but across history. Thus, Johnny Appleseed remains an enduring figure, not because he fit neatly into the expectations of his time, but because he transcended them. After John Chapman's death in 1845, his story quickly took on a life of its own, expanding far beyond the realities of the man himself. Newspapers and early American writers were among the first to mythologize him, turning the humble nurseryman into a legendary frontier figure. Over time, his story was simplified and romanticized, celebrating him as a symbol of kindness, nature, and pioneering spirit. This growing legend reached new heights in 1948 when Walt Disney released an animated short about Johnny Appleseed, introducing him to millions of American children. Disney's portrayal was charming and idealized, a barefoot wanderer joyfully planting apple trees wherever he went, and it deeply cemented Johnny's image in popular culture, blending fact and fiction into an irresistible American folk hero. Apples themselves held an important place in early American identity, which made Johnny's story even more powerful. Apples were not primarily grown for eating fresh. Instead, they were crucial for making hard cider, which was safer to drink than much of the available water. In this sense, apple orchards symbolized self-sufficiency, prosperity, and the taming of the wild frontier. Johnny Appleseed's legacy tied directly into these values, making him a living embodiment of the American ideal, someone who helped settlers survive and thrive in the New World. Even today, John Chapman's influence is felt in American agriculture and beyond. Though many of the apple varieties he planted were more suited for cider than for eating, his early nurseries helped establish apple cultivation as a major agricultural pursuit in the United States. His emphasis on planting from seed, rather than grafting, which produces consistent varieties, also speaks to a larger American celebration of diversity, resilience, and adaptation. Johnny Appleseed's true impact, then, is not just in the trees he planted, but in the spirit he nurtured, a spirit of hope, generosity, and deep connection to the land that continues to shape American culture. The legend of Johnny Appleseed continues to resonate deeply with modern America, not only as a quirky folktale, but as a symbol of values that still hold significance today. First and foremost, Johnny's story embodies environmentalism and a harmonious relationship with nature. His belief in planting apple trees to nourish future generations reflects a profound respect for the natural world, showing that one person's actions can have a lasting positive impact on the environment. In an era where environmental consciousness is more important than ever, Johnny Appleseed's legacy serves as a reminder that our actions, whether large or small, can shape the planet for years to come. Beyond environmentalism, Johnny's story is a reflection of the early American spirit. His journey through a rapidly expanding frontier captures the resilience, resourcefulness, and pioneering drive that defined the early days of the United States. Johnny didn't just plant trees. He symbolized the drive to create a lasting impact on a country that was still finding its identity. The image of a solitary, barefoot man planting trees across the vast wilderness speaks to the endurance and optimism that were essential to America's westward expansion. Johnny Appleseed's enduring legacy is more than just a collection of whimsical stories about a barefoot wanderer planting apple trees. At its core, his legend speaks to the American ideal of self-reliance and independence, values that are deeply ingrained in the nation's identity. In the mid-1800s, when Johnny was active, America was still a young country with vast, untamed territories that required settlers to be resourceful and self-sufficient. Johnny embodied this ethos not just through his physical acts of planting trees, but through his lifestyle choices, living off the land, traveling alone, and building connections with communities while maintaining his independence. This connection to nature and reliance on one's own abilities was a key characteristic of early American frontier life, where individuals had to create their own livelihoods and adapt to harsh, often unpredictable conditions. Johnny Appleseed's ability to live a simple life without the trappings of wealth or conventional social structures reflects the values that many Americans still hold dear today. The importance of being connected to the land, living in harmony with nature, and being resourceful in the face of challenges. In a world where the fast pace of modern life often distances individuals from their natural surroundings, Johnny's legacy is a reminder of the deep, meaningful relationship that people once had with the earth and the fruits of their labor. Moreover, Johnny Appleseed's story conveys a profound belief in the power of one individual to make a lasting difference. Johnny's work wasn't grand or flashy. It was consistent, thoughtful, and grounded in his belief that small actions could lead to lasting, positive change. His planting of apple trees wasn't just about providing food, but about creating something that would serve communities for generations. This idea that even a small, humble act can have a far-reaching impact resonates with the American spirit of individualism. It encourages people to believe that no matter how modest their resources or circumstances, they can make a difference in the world through perseverance, authenticity, and a connection to something larger than themselves. In today's world, where sustainability, environmental awareness, and personal responsibility are becoming increasingly important, Johnny Appleseed's legacy is more relevant than ever. His life serves as an example of how individuals can contribute to the well-being of the planet and society, not through grand gestures, but through consistent, purposeful action. Whether through environmental activism, local community work, or simply living in a way that respects nature, Johnny's story reminds us that everyone has the potential to leave a positive mark on the world by living with intention and in harmony with the earth. In this sense, Johnny Appleseed is not just a relic of American folklore. He is a lasting symbol of the values that continue to inspire generations of Americans to live simply, authentically, and responsibly. In conclusion, Johnny Appleseed's true story diverges in significant ways from the myth that has grown around him over the years. The man, John Chapman, was not a barefoot wanderer aimlessly scattering apple seeds, nor was he universally beloved or a free-spirited vagabond. Instead, he was a dedicated religious individual who planted apple trees with a clear purpose, establishing nurseries and selling saplings to settlers. His life was shaped by a deep connection to nature and a commitment to his faith, making him far more than just a folk hero. The myth of Johnny Appleseed, however, embodies ideals of American self-reliance, harmony with nature, and individualism, values that continue to resonate today. While the real John Chapman was a man with a mission, the legend that has emerged serves as a timeless reminder of the power of simple acts to change the world. Maybe legends aren't about pure facts. Maybe they're about the stories we choose to believe. What do you think? If you enjoyed learning about the real story behind Johnny Appleseed, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear which other American folk legends you'd like to explore next. Let's dive into the stories that shaped our history together. Thanks for watching.